You know, there are certain names in history that just, they act like magnets. They just snap together. You can't
Uh-huh.
really say one without the other. You have Romeo and Juliet, Lewis and Clark. And if you're looking at European history, especially Spain, there's one brand name that just dominates everything. Ferdinand and Isabella.
The ultimate power couple.
That's right.
The Catholic monarchs. It's iconic.
Exactly. But here's the thing that's always sort of bugged me. When we talk about them, the spotlight usually drifts towards Isabella.
Oh, absolutely.
She's the one with the dramatic will, the fervent piety. She's the one who gets the credit for backing Columbus. Ferdinand usually feels like, well, like the husband.
A supporting character.
Yeah, the supporting character in her biopic.
It's a really common perception, and Isabella has this incredibly strong cultural gravity, for good reason. But if you actually peel back the layers of how modern Spain was built, the mechanics of the state, the military, the foreign policy, you find that Ferdinand II of Aragon wasn't just a supporting actor. He was, and you could argue this pretty strongly, the most effective political operator of the entire Renaissance.
So today we're going to try and fix the lighting on this stage. We're diving deep into the life and reign of Ferdinand II. And looking at our source material, biographies, treaties, military records, the mission is to see how this guy wasn't just Isabella's husband,
Right.
but the de facto first king of Spain and a master strategist who basically invented the concept of the modern superpower.
And he did it while juggling a geopolitical situation that would make a modern head of state just have a complete breakdown.
That is the first big aha moment I had going through all this. I think most of us picture Spain on a map as this, solid square block.
Yeah, one big country.
But when Ferdinand comes to power, Spain didn't exist, did it?
Not even close. No.
Yeah.
If you looked at a map of the Iberian Peninsula in, say, the mid-1400s, you wouldn't see one country. You'd see a patchwork quilt.
Okay.
You had Portugal on the west coast doing its own thing. You had the tiny kingdom of Navarre tucked up in the Pyrenees Mountains.
Right.
You had the Islamic Emirate of Granada all the way down south.
Yeah.
And then you had the two heavyweights, the Crown of Castile and the Crown of Aragon.
And these weren't just two provinces at the same place. They were like totally different worlds.
Completely different. Castile, where Isabella would rule, was massive. It was agricultural, and it had a tradition of a strong, centralized monarchy. It looked out towards the Atlantic.
Okay.
Aragon, which was Ferdinand's heritage, was actually a confederation. It wasn't just one kingdom. It included Aragon proper, but also Catalonia, Valencia, and islands like Majorca, Sicily, and even Sardinia.
Wow.
It was a Mediterranean merchant empire. And the king's power there was much, much more limited by local laws and parliaments.
So Ferdinand is the figure who somehow has to stitch this whole patchwork quilt together.
He's the guy who connects the medieval world, the world of, local feudal squabbles and the Reconquista, to the modern era of global empires. But he didn't do it by magic. He did it through a relentless, lifelong hustle.
So let's start the merger then. Section 1 of our dive, the marriage, 1469.
The year it all begins, a very big year.
On the surface, it looks like a fairy tale, right? The Prince of Aragon marries the Princess of Castile. But looking at the details, this was a high-stakes business deal from the get-go. First off, they were cousins.
Second cousins, to be exact, both from the House of Trustman. And you have to understand, in the 15th century, that degree of blood relation was a major a canonical impediment.
Meaning the church wouldn't allow it.
Exactly. You couldn't just get married. The church forbade it. They needed what's called a papal dispensation, basically a special permission slip from the Pope to make the whole thing legal.
And the sources imply there was some shady business with that paperwork, right?
Oh, yeah, there was. The original dispensation they used might have been, well, let's call it creatively acquired.
Creatively acquired.
Or even forged by Ferdinand's father and the Archbishop of Toledo to make sure the wedding happened fast. They didn't get the official retroactive approval until much later.
So that just shows you how desperate they were to seal this alliance.
Exactly.
Why the rush?
Well, Isabella's position in Castile was really precarious. She had a rival for the throne. She needed Ferdinand's military strength, and she needed it immediately.
And what did he get out of it?
Ferdinand needed Castile's resources. Aragon was constantly fighting with France. This was, at its heart, a survival pact.
And like any good business partnership, they had a contract. This prenuptial agreement is fascinating. The motto they adopted was Tanto monta, monta tanto.
Which translates roughly to, they amount to the same, or maybe more accurately, she amounts to as much as he.
Now, traditionally, I've always heard that interpreted as a romantic statement of equality. We are equals in love, but you're saying it was more like a legal firewall?
Absolutely, 100%. You have to remember the context. The Castilian nobles were terrified that Ferdinand, this Aragonese prince, was going to come in and just take over their country.
Right, they didn't want a foreign king.
Of course not. So this motto and the whole marriage contract were designed to reassure them. It explicitly stated that in Castile, Isabella was the true monarch. Her signature was required. Her appointments were valid. Ferdinand was effectively being told, you are the king, but she is the boss of this territory.
This leads us to a term that kept popping up in the research, jura uxoris.
Right. It's Latin. It means by right of his wife.
Okay.
So when Isabella's brother died in 1474 and she became Queen of Castile, Ferdinand became King of Castile jura uxoris. He was king only because he was married to her.
So if she died?
If she died or if they divorced, his authority in Castile would, in theory, just evaporate. Poof, gone.
Whereas in Aragon?
In Aragon, it was a complete opposite. When Ferdinand's father died in 1479, Ferdinand became the King of Aragon in his own right. Isabella became the queen consort. She had no legal power to govern Aragon at all.
This concept is so important for you to grasp. We call it the union of the crowns, but it wasn't a unification of the nations.
No, not even close. It was a personal union.
Yeah.
Think of it like this. Imagine two separate corporations, let's say a shipping company and a farming company.
Okay.
They agree to hire the same CEO. The CEO runs both, but the companies keep their separate bank accounts, separate boards of directors, separate HR policies, and totally separate laws.
So if you were a citizen of Zaragoza in Aragon...
You were a foreigner in Toledo in Castile. You had to pay customs duties to cross the border. You couldn't hold office in the other kingdom. It was not one country.
That is wild. So Ferdinand is basically the CEO of a holding company with two very different subsidiaries that, frankly, don't really like each other.
That's a perfect analogy. And for the first few years, his main job was just stopping the Castilian subsidiary from going bankrupt. They had to fight a civil war immediately after taking the throne.
Against Isabella's niece, Joanna la Beltranea.
Yes. Joanna was the daughter of the previous king, but there were rumors she was illegitimate.
Yeah.
So Portugal backed Joanna's claim. Aragon backed Isabella's. This was the War of the Castilian Succession.
And this is where Ferdinand proves he isn't just a trophy husband. He actually leads the armies.
He was a very capable field commander. He'd spent his youth fighting in Catalonia, so he knew warfare. He led the Castilian troops. He secured the key cities. And by 1479, the war was won.
Okay, so Isabella is secure on her throne.
She's secure. Ferdinand succeeds his father in Aragon, and the two crowns are finally united in practice.
But again, I just want to stress this, united only in their persons.
Correct. The legal merging of Spain into one centralized state, that wouldn't happen for another 2 centuries, really until the Bourbon dynasty in the 1700s. Ferdinand was managing a balancing act that relied entirely on his personal presence and his relationship with Isabella.
So he's got the chair, he's the CEO. Now we get to the year that really defines the brand, 1492.
The Annus Mirabilis, the miraculous year.
The outline calls it a tripod of events, 3 massive pillars that hold up the legacy of Ferdinand and Isabella, all happening in the same calendar year.
It is genuinely hard to find another year in history where so many world-altering events happen in such a short span, all driven by the same 2 people.
Let's start with pillar number 1, the end of the Reconquista.
The conquest of Granada. We have to understand the scale of this. For nearly 800 years since the Umayyad conquest way back in 711, there had been a Muslim presence in Spain.
A huge part of the peninsula's history.
A foundational part. The Christian kingdoms had been slowly, century by century, pushing south. By 1482, only the Emirate of Granada was left.
And Ferdinand decides it's time to close the account.
He and Isabella launched a 10-year war. And it wasn't easy. Granada was mountainous, it was heavily fortified, and it was wealthy. Ferdinand had to basically revolutionize the Spanish military to take it.
How so?
He brought in experts in artillery and siege warfare from all over Europe. This wasn't just knights charging on horses anymore. This was modern industrial warfare with gunpowder.
And when Granada finally surrendered in January 1492, the optics must have been just incredible.
It was sensational news across all of Europe. You have to remember, just a few decades earlier, Constantinople had fallen to the Ottoman Turks. Christendom felt like it was losing.
Right.
The fall of Granada was seen as the great counterpunch. It made Ferdinand and Isabella heroes of the faith.
Which is why the Pope, Alexander VI, the Spaniard himself, by the way, a Borgia, gave them the title the Catholic monarchs.
Los Reyes Católicos. It gave them immense moral authority. But that authority led directly into the second pillar of 1492, which is much more controversial and tragic to modern eyes.
The Alhambra Decree.
Yes. Less than 3 months after entering the Alhambra Palace in Granada as victors, they signed the edict expelling all practicing Jews from Spain.
The source material is just stark on this. It wasn't a suggestion. It was convert or leave.
It was an ultimatum. The Jewish community had been in Spain since Roman times. They were woven into the very fabric of society, doctors, financiers, scholars, artisans, and Ferdinand and Isabella gave them 4 months to sell their property, often at ruinous prices because, of course, everyone knew they had to sell and get out unless they accepted baptism.
Why? I mean, if Ferdinand is this pragmatic, calculating genius, why expel a population that is so vital to your economy?
That is the great historical debate. And it's complicated. Some blame Isabella's religious zeal. But if we look at Ferdinand's pattern of behavior, it also fits his political goals perfectly. He was building a modern state. And in his mind, and in the mind of many Renaissance rulers, a strong state required social cohesion. And for him, the glue of that cohesion was religion. One king, one law, one faith. He viewed religious diversity as a political weakness, a source of potential treason or disunity.
So he prioritized political unity over economic stability.
Precisely. He was willing to take the economic hit to secure what he saw as the ideological purity of the realm. Tens of thousands left moving to Portugal, to Italy, and largely to the Ottoman Empire.
But many stayed and converted.
They did. They became known as conversos. But this created a whole new problem for Ferdinand. Were these conversions sincere? Or were they secret Jews practicing in private? This paranoia is what empowered the Spanish Inquisition.
And the Inquisition was already active by this point, right?
Yes, it had been established in 1478, but the expulsion turbocharged it. Ferdinand used the Inquisition not just as a religious court, but as a tool of state control. It was one of the few institutions that had authority in both Castile and Aragon. It was a way for him to reach across those borderlines we talked about. If you were a noble in Aragon who was, say, annoying the king, the Inquisition could be a very convenient weapon to use against you.
It's a chilling example of how state building works in this era. It's not about freedom, it's about control.
Absolute control.
And then weirdly, in the middle of all this heavy, brutal statecraft, you have pillar number 3, the Atlantic expansion. Christopher Columbus.
The wild card. The outlier.
I always find it funny that Ferdinand was the skeptic here. We grew up thinking of Columbus as this great visionary, but Ferdinand basically looked at his math and said, "You're wrong."
And Ferdinand was right. Columbus had calculated the size of the Earth incorrectly. He thought Asia was much closer than it was. Ferdinand's royal astronomers looked at the data and told the king, "This Italian sailor is massively underestimating the width of the ocean. He'll starve before he gets to Japan."
So why on earth did he sign off on it?
Low risk, high reward. Isabella was the primary backer, but Ferdinand allowed it because the cost was minimal. It cost about the same as maintaining a royal guest house for a week.
That's it.
That's it. If Columbus drowned, they lost 3 small ships. No big deal. If he was right, yeah, well, they might beat Portugal to the spice trade.
And he was right in the sense that he hit land. He just hit the wrong continent.
He hit the jackpot. The discovery of the Americas fundamentally changed the entire portfolio of Ferdinand's holding company. Suddenly, they aren't just a Mediterranean power, they are an Atlantic power.
And this brings us to the Treaty of Tordesillas in 1494. This, to me, is the peak of Ferdinand's arrogance, or maybe confidence.
It is breathtakingly audacious. Ferdinand and the King of Portugal, with the Pope's blessing, literally take a map of the Atlantic and draw a line down the middle.
Just a line on a map.
A line on a map. Everything discovered west of the line belonged to Castile. Everything east belonged to Portugal.
They carved up the entire non-European world before they even knew what was in it.
It shows you the scope of Ferdinand's ambition. He wasn't just thinking about the next border town in Spain. He was thinking about global hegemony.
But I want to circle back to the internal policy for a second. We talked about the Jews in 1492, but the sources mention a broken promise in 1502 regarding the Muslims.
This is key to understanding Ferdinand's ruthlessness. When Granada surrendered in 1492, the Treaty of Granada was signed, and it was a surprisingly generous treaty.
What did it say?
It guaranteed that the Muslims, who were called the Mudijars, could keep their religion, their customs, and their property. They were subjects of the crown, but they could remain Muslim.
So a live and let live approach.
Initially, yes, but it didn't last. The pressure from the church to convert them just increased and increased. There were some revolts in the mountains. And by 1502, just 10 years later, Ferdinand and Isabella decided the live and let live phase was over.
So they just abrogated the treaty.
They ripped it up completely. They issued a decree for Castile: convert to Christianity or be expelled. The exact same choice they gave the Jews in 1492.
So the Muslims who converted became known as Moriscos.
Yes. And just like the Countersos, they lived under a constant cloud of suspicion for the next century. But for Ferdinand, the goal was achieved. On paper, at least, Spain was now an entirely Christian kingdom. He had forced homogeneity on a very diverse population.
It's so interesting to see the contrast. At home, he demands total obedience and rigid adherence to the rules. But abroad, Section 4 of our deep dive, abroad, Ferdinand was playing a completely different game.
Foreign policy is where Ferdinand II earns his reputation as the master. In fact, Machiavelli famously admired Ferdinand. He saw him as the prototype of a new prince, someone who uses religion and reputation to gain power, but who is willing to braid his word the moment it becomes advantageous.
The source material has this fantastic anecdote involving the King of France.
Yes, Louis XII, a constant rival.
So Louis was complaining that Ferdinand had deceived him twice in their negotiations. And when Ferdinand heard this report, he didn't get offended. He didn't deny it. He reportedly laughed and said,
"The King of France complains that I have twice deceived him. He lies, the fool. I have deceived him 10 times and more."
10 times and more. That is such a flex. I mean, it tells you everything you need to know about his diplomatic style.
He viewed diplomacy as war by other means. To him, a treaty wasn't some sacred bond. It was a temporary tactic. If breaking the treaty gave him a better outcome than keeping it, well, he broke it.
So let's look at the Italian Wars, because that seems to be where he practiced this the most. Why was everyone so obsessed with Italy at this time?
Italy was the prize of Europe. It was the center of the Renaissance. It was incredibly wealthy, but it was politically fractured into all these small city-states.
Easy pickings.
Exactly.
Yeah.
France wanted to control it. Spain wanted to control it. It was the battleground for who would dominate the continent.
And the Naples campaign is the perfect example of Ferdinand's method.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
The Kingdom of Naples is basically the southern half of Italy. In the year 1500, Ferdinand and the King of France signed the Treaty of Granada, not to be confused with the city surrender.
Another Treaty of Granada.
Okay. In this treaty, they agreed to conquer Naples together and split it. You take the north, I'll take the south.
A partition plan. Sounds reasonable.
Right, so they go in, they conquer it. But Ferdinand knew the partition wouldn't work. The border was fuzzy. So while they were supposedly allies, Ferdinand sent his best general, Gonzalo Fernandez de Cordoba, the great captain, to the region.
Okay.
And Gonzalo completely retrained the Spanish infantry, creating the early version of the tercios, heavily armed with pikes and firearms. A revolutionary force. And then, as soon as a dispute over the border arose, which Ferdinand probably manufactured, he ordered Gonzalo to attack the French.
His own allies.
His own allies. And the Spanish army, which was now better trained and better led, just smashed the French. By 1504, the French were kicked out, and Ferdinand was the sole king of Naples.
So he signed a treaty to share it, just to get his foot in the door so he could take the whole thing.
Classic Ferdinand. And he did the same thing with shifting alliances. Look at the League of Cambrai.
This is the team switching moment, right?
It is dizzying. First, he joins the League of Cambrai. He's allied with France and the Pope to fight against the city of Venice because he wants some Venetian ports in southern Italy.
Okay, so they beat Venice.
They beat Venice. Ferdinand gets his ports. Mission accomplished.
Right.
But then he looks at the map and thinks, France is getting too strong in northern Italy now. So what does he do? He leaves that alliance and forms a new one. The Holy League allied with Venice and the Pope against his old partner, France.
Wait, he literally switched jerseys in the middle of the game.
He did. And it worked. He checked French power and he consolidated his own. He was the great balancer of Europe. He always made sure no one else got strong enough to threaten him.
And he applied this expansionist logic to his own backyard, too. We can't forget Navarre.
No, that is the final piece of the puzzle. This happens late in his life, in 1512. Ferdinand is an old man. Isabella has been dead for years, and the Kingdom of Navarre is that final independent chunk up in the north of Spain.
So how did he justify taking it over?
He used a religious excuse, as he often did. The Pope had excommunicated the King of Navarre for being too friendly with France. Ferdinand used that as a pretext to invade. He sent the Duke of Alba in, conquered the southern part of the kingdom, which is essentially the Spanish Basque country today, and he annexed it.
And initially, he attached it to his own kingdom, to Aragon, right?
He did, but he realized pretty quickly that Castile was the stronger long-term partner for it. So he eventually shifted the legal annexation to the Crown of Castile, and that move, that physically completed the map of modern Spain. If you look at a map today, the borders of mainland Spain are essentially what Ferdinand established in 1512.
So he's the architect, he's the conqueror, he's the deceptive genius. But Section 5 of our outline is where the story just turns into a full-blown soap opera.
Yeah, it does.
Because for all his meticulous planning, Ferdinand had a massive blind spot. Biology.
The succession crisis. This is the part of the story that often gets skipped in high school history, but it is by far the most dramatic part of his life.
It all starts in 1504. Isabella dies.
And the moment she takes her last breath, that personal union we talked about just falls apart. Remember, Ferdinand was King of Castile jure exoris.
By right of his wife.
By right of his wife. And when the wife dies, the widower loses his job.
So he's fired from being King of Castile.
Legally, yes, he's out. The crown passes directly to their daughter, Joanna.
Joanna. The famous Juana la Loca. Joanna the Mad.
We need to unpack her situation. Joanna was married to Philip the Handsome, the Duke of Burgundy, and a member of the powerful Habsburg family. And Philip was young, he was ambitious, and he wanted to rule Castile himself.
And Ferdinand wanted to keep ruling Castile as regent for his daughter. So you have a father-in-law versus son-in-law showdown.
Huge showdown.
Yeah.
And the Castilian nobility had to pick a side. And guess what? They hated Ferdinand.
Why? He just won them an empire.
But he was an Aragonese outsider. He was strict. He enforced the laws. He taxed them. Philip, on the other hand, was a stranger who didn't know the language or the customs. So the nobles thought, if we back Philip, he'll be weak, and we can run the show. So they betrayed Ferdinand, and they backed Philip.
That must have been a bitter pill for Ferdinand to swallow. He spends 30 years building this kingdom, and they kick him to the curb.
It was utterly humiliating. In 1506, Ferdinand was forced to sign the Treaty of Villafafla. He formally renounced his government of Castile. He packed his bags and went back to Aragon. Philip and Joanna were the new monarchs of Castile.
And this is where Ferdinand does something that just really reveals his character. He doesn't just retire to play golf or, hunt in his case.
No.
He plots revenge, and he decides to get remarried.
This is the plot twist of all plot twists. He marries Germaine of Foix.
And Germaine isn't just some random noblewoman.
No, she is the niece of the King of France.
Wait, the guy he deceived 10 times? His archenemy?
The very same. Ferdinand was so desperate to check Philip's power that he allied with his worst enemy. But the marriage had a very specific biological goal. He wanted a son.
Okay, let's game this out. This is the big what-if scenario. If Ferdinand and Germaine have a son.
If they have a son who survives, that boy inherits the crown of Aragon. Joanna and Philip keep Castile.
Which means Spain splits in half?
Correct. The union is dissolved. Gone. Aragon and Castile go their separate ways. Aragon probably remains a Mediterranean power, maybe focusing on Italy.
Yeah.
Castile goes alone into the Atlantic. There is no Spanish empire. There is just a Castilian empire and an Aragonese empire.
He was willing to destroy his entire life's work, the unification of Spain, just to cite his son-in-law.
It wasn't just spite, it was dynastic survival. He did not want the Habsburgs taking over his ancestral lands of Aragon. And here's the kicker. They did have a son.
They did.
Prince John of Girona was born in May of 1509.
Yeah.
And he died a few hours later.
Wow.
Just think about that. The entire history of modern Spain, the global empire, the map of Europe.
Yeah.
It all hung on the lungs of an infant who lived for maybe 6 hours.
Okay.
If that baby survives, history forks completely.
That is just terrifyingly fragile. So the baby dies, the union is preserved by tragedy, but Ferdinand gets lucky again, right? Because Philip doesn't stick around long either.
It's not at all.
Yeah.
Philip the Handsome enjoys his victory in Castile for about 5 months. Then, in September 1506, he plays a game of pelota, an early form of handball, gets sweaty, drinks a glass of ice-cold water, and gets a raging fever. Days later, he's dead.
Ice water. Do we buy that? I mean, come on.
Well, historically, dysentery or typhoid is the most likely culprit. But at the time, everyone whispered poison. And who benefits most? Ferdinand.
So Philip is dead. Joanna is the queen, but she is understandably distraught.
She was absolutely devastated. She traveled across Spain with his coffin for months, refusing to bury him. And this behavior, whether it was genuine grief or something else, it cemented her reputation as Joanna the Mad. And this gave Ferdinand the opening he needed.
He comes back.
He swoops back into Castile. He claims his daughter is mentally unfit to rule, and he has her confined to a palace in Tordesillas.
And she stays there for a while.
For almost 50 years. She remains the nominal queen until she dies in 1555, but she never rules again. Ferdinand takes over as regent. He essentially locks up his own daughter to secure his power.
That is Shakespearean. It's just brutal.
It is. He crushed the rebellious nobles who had sided with Philip, he restored order, and he ruled both kingdoms effectively as one until his own death in 1516.
So let's look at the legacy then. Section 6. Ferdinand dies. He leaves this complicated double kingdom structure behind. Who gets the keys to the car?
His grandson, Joanna and Philip's son, Charles.
Charles of Ghent. Who becomes the Holy Roman Emperor Charles V?
Charles is the ultimate beneficiary of all this tragedy and all this strategy. Because of the alleged madness of his mother, the early death of his father, and the death of Ferdinand's infant son with his second wife, Charles inherits everything.
It's the greatest inheritance in history, isn't it?
It's staggering. From his mother's side, he gets Castile in the growing American colonies. From his grandfather, Ferdinand, he gets Aragon, Naples, Sicily, and Sardinia. And from his father, Philip's side, he gets the Netherlands and the Habsburg lands in Austria.
And this is the moment. This is when Spain becomes the global superpower.
Yes, this is the birth of the empire, where the sun never sets. But you have to see that Charles didn't build the engine. He just turned the key. Ferdinand built the engine.
Explain that. What specifically did Ferdinand leave him that made this all work?
He left him a professionalized diplomatic corps. The first permanent embassies in Europe were Ferdinand's idea. He left him the tercios, that military infantry organization that would dominate European battlefields for 150 years.
Okay.
He left him a secure border with France, thanks to annexing Navarre, and a secure southern border, thanks to conquering Granada. And, of course, he left him the legal claim to the Americas.
So without Ferdinand the Shark, Charles V is just a guy with a lot of titles but no real power.
Exactly. Ferdinand did the dirty work. He broke the treaties, he expelled the dissenters, he fought the civil wars, he locked up his daughter. He paved the road that Charles marched down.
It really changes how you view the Catholic monarchs. We see them in paintings looking all pious and calm, but the reality was a lot more. Game of Thrones.
It was pure realpolitik. Ferdinand was a man of his time. He was intolerant, he was ruthless, and he was incredibly ambitious. But he was effective. He took a medieval peninsula and turned it into the first modern world power.
So let's wrap this up with a final thought for you to take away. When we go to Spain today, or when we look at the world map, where do we see Ferdinand's ghost?
I think we see it in the tension that still exists within Spain itself. We hear about Catalan independence movements or Basque regionalism. That is a direct legacy of Ferdinand's decision to create a personal union rather than a fully unified state.
Because he respected, or was forced to respect, the local laws and institutions.
Yes. He kept the Generalitat in Catalonia. He kept the fueros in the Basque country. He didn't smash them all into one Spanish identity legally. He just put them all under one roof. That distinctiveness survived for centuries because of how he chose to structure the union.
And the what if is going to stick with me, the fragility of it all.
It is the ultimate historical lesson, isn't it? We tend to think that the rise of nations is inevitable, that Spain was always going to happen, but it wasn't. It was a series of accidents, strategic marriages, and one very short-lived baby.
Right.
If Prince John of Girona lives, the Spanish Armada never happens. The Habsburgs never dominate Europe. The colonization of the Americas happens in a completely different way.
The world we live in is essentially the result of a coin toss in 1509.
A coin toss, and a very, very cunning king who knew how to capitalize on every single outcome.
Well, there you have it. Ferdinand II of Aragon. The man who deceived the King of France 10 times, drew a line down the Atlantic Ocean, and almost accidentally dismantled the country he spent his entire life building.
A complicated legacy for a fascinating man.
Thanks for diving in with us. We'll catch you on the next one.